The choice that changed everything. The night was no longer silent. The forest trembled with the sound of drums, horns, and footsteps. The hunters had returned, and this time they did not come as a few. They came as an army. Their weapons glowed, in the dark, their armor shining with cruel light. Inside the cave, Daniel stood at the entrance, a crude spear in his hands. His body still carried the marks of the last battle, but his eyes burned with something new, something unshakable. Behind him, the alien mother gathered her children close, whispering soft words to calm them, but her eyes never left Daniel's back. She knew what he was about to do. The children clung to her robes, their small voices trembling. "Father, stay." Daniel turned for a moment. He knelt down, placing a hand on each child's head. His smile was tired but full of love. "I will always stay," he said gently, "but to keep you safe, I must fight." The mother stepped forward, her glowing eyes wet with tears. "You cannot fight them all. They will kill you." Daniel met her gaze, and for a long moment silence filled the cave. Then he said the words that would change everything. "If I die, it won't be as a wanderer. It will be as a husband, as a father." Her breath caught. The words struck deeper than any weapon. She raised her trembling hand and touched his cheek, as if to hold that promise in her heart forever. Outside, the hunters drew closer, their chants echoing through the mountains. Daniel rose to his feet, spear in hand, ready to face them. But before he could step into the storm, the mother moved past him. She placed her hands against the stone wall of the cave, the ancient markings glowing brighter than ever before. Daniel stared in shock. The symbols spread like fire across the rock, filling the cave with light. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Her voice was steady, though tears still ran down her face. "My ancestors left power here. It can be used only once. But it requires a bond, a choice made not from fear but from love." The light grew stronger, wrapping around her body like silver flames. She turned to him, her voice trembling. "If you truly mean what you said, if you will be husband, if you will be father, then the cave will answer." Daniel's chest tightened. He understood. This was more than survival. This was destiny. He dropped his spear. He walked to her, standing in the glow of the symbols, and placed his hand over hers. His voice was steady, louder than the storm, stronger than the drums outside. "I choose you. I choose them. I choose this family." The cave roared with light. The markings burned like stars, and the mother gasped as the power surged through her. Daniel felt it too, flowing into him, binding them together. The children clung to their parents, their small bodies glowing as if they were part of the same flame. Outside, the hunters reached the entrance. They charged forward with their weapons raised, only to be struck by a wave of energy so fierce it shook the ground. The cave exploded with silver light, blasting the enemies back into the forest. Trees cracked, rocks split, and the army scattered like leaves in the wind. When the light faded, silence returned. The hunters lay unconscious, their weapons shattered. None dared to rise again. Inside the cave, Daniel and the mother collapsed, to their knees, their hands still pressed together against the glowing stone. The markings dimmed slowly, leaving only a faint shimmer on the wall. The power was gone, spent in one final act. The mother turned to him, her eyes shining with awe and exhaustion. You gave everything. You chose us." Daniel pulled, her close, holding her tightly as the children crawled into their arms. His voice was soft but unshakable. "I will always choose you." The storm outside faded. The forest was quiet again, not with fear but with peace. The hunters were gone, broken and scattered. For the first time since the night he had heard that cry in the darkness, Daniel felt something he had not known in years: belonging. The mother leaned her head against his chest, whispering, "Then we are no longer abandoned." Daniel smiled, his arms wrapping around her and the children. "No, we are a family, and no one will take that from us." The cave that had once been a prison of sorrow had now become the birthplace of a new beginning. A human, who had nothing, had found everything. An abandoned mother had found a husband. Two lost children had found a father, and together they had found hope. As dawn broke, light spilled into the cave, warm and golden. Daniel looked at the horizon, holding his family close. The road ahead was unknown, full of dangers yet to come. But one truth was clear. His wandering days were over. He was no longer alone. He was home, a family born in battle. The cave smelled of smoke and blood. The fire flickered low, shadows dancing across the stone walls. Daniel sat near the entrance, his body bruised and cut, every breath heavy with pain. His makeshift spear lay broken beside him, splintered from the battle. Outside, the forest was quiet again, but it was not the quiet of peace. It was the silence of enemies gathering strength. Behind him, the alien mother struggled against the glowing net that still clung to her skin. Her arms shook as she pulled at the wires, each touch burning her flesh. But she did not cry out. Her glowing eyes were fixed on Daniel, full of worry, as if his pain hurt her more than her own. The children crawled close to him, their tiny hands touching his arm, his shoulder, his chest. They did not speak, but their wide eyes said everything. To them, he was no longer a stranger. He was their protector, their father. Daniel lifted one hand and placed it gently on the closest child's head. "It's all right," he whispered, though his voice was weak. "I'm still here." The mother's voice trembled as she spoke. "You fought them with nothing but wood. You stood against blades and armor. Why?" Daniel's gaze moved from her to the children. His voice was low, steady. "Because I couldn't let them win. Not while you were here. Not while they were here." Her eyes glistened with tears. For the first time since he had found her, she smiled, not with joy, but with gratitude. It was a fragile smile, one that carried both sorrow and hope. The children pressed closer, curling against him as if he had always been their shelter. And in that moment, something inside Daniel shifted. He was no longer just a man lost in the wilderness. He was no longer alone. The mother reached for the glowing net again, but this time Daniel rose weakly and knelt beside her. He gripped the wires, ignoring the pain as sparks burned his skin. With a grunt, he pulled hard, breaking one glowing strand after another until the net split apart. The energy died, and the pieces fell to the ground. The mother gasped, free at last. She looked at him, her hands shaking. "You freed me, even when it hurt you." Daniel gave a tired smile. "That's what family does." The word hung in the cave like a new fire. Family. The mother's lips trembled as if she had forgotten how to say it. Slowly, she whispered, "Family." She crawled closer, her children still clinging to Daniel, and for the first time she did not hold back her tears. She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his shoulder, her body trembling. "I was abandoned by my people. I thought I would die alone. But you fight for us as if you were one of us." Daniel placed a hand gently on her back. "Maybe I am now." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something that had been missing from both their lives. Trust, connection, love, though neither of them dared to name it yet. But the peace lasted only a moment. From outside, a distant horn echoed through the forest. The sound was deep, sharp, and terrifying. The hunters were not finished. They were gathering more. The mother stiffened, pulling back quickly. "They will come again, stronger. We must be ready." Daniel nodded. He rose slowly, his body aching, and looked around the cave. His eyes fell on the strange, glowing markings, still faintly lit on the stone wall. "That power you used before, can it protect us?" She shook her head. "The cave is old. It has little strength left. It can frighten them, but it cannot stop an army." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Then we'll have to fight another way." The children looked at him with wide eyes. One of them whispered softly in broken words, their voice small but clear. "Father? Fight?" Daniel froze. His chest tightened. He looked at the child, his heart shaking at the sound of that single word. Father. The mother covered her mouth, her tears falling again. She had not taught them to say it. The child had chosen it. And Daniel realized in their eyes the choice had already been made. He knelt down, pulling both children close. "Yes," he whispered, his voice steady. "Father will fight." Diaz, mother looked at him with a gaze that held more than gratitude now. It held something deeper, something she had been too afraid to hope for. She touched his cheek gently, her hand trembling. "Then we are no longer alone." Daniel looked at her, his tired eyes fierce with resolve. "No, we're a family now, and no one will take that away." The horn echoed again, closer this time. The forest shivered with the sound of hunters moving through the mist. Daniel stood tall, blood still dripping from his wounds but his spirit unbroken. The children clung to their mother, their eyes shining with trust. The cave was no longer just a shelter. It was the birthplace of something stronger than fear. A family had been born in battle, and in the darkness of the forest, their enemies marched closer, unaware that this human had already made his choice. He would fight not for survival, but for love. The first attack. The forest did not rest that night. Even though the hunters had slipped back into the mist, their presence lingered like poison in the air. The cave felt smaller, colder, every shadow carrying the threat of another blade. Daniel sat near the entrance, his makeshift spear across his lap, his arm wrapped in a strip of cloth the alien mother had torn from her own clothing. The wound still burned, but he ignored the pain. His eyes stayed on the trees. Behind him, the mother held her children close. She whispered soft words in her strange tongue, rocking them gently. But Daniel could hear the fear in her voice. She knew this was not finished. The hunters would return, and when they did, they would not come in twos or threes. They would come in force. The firelight flickered across Daniel's tired face. He thought of leaving again, of finding another path, before it was too late. But every time he looked back at the children, his heart gave him the same answer. Stay. The night dragged on. The forest was silent, too silent. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. It was the silence of predators waiting to strike. And then it came. A sudden howl split the night, a sound that shook the trees. The children cried out, clinging to their mother. Daniel stood quickly, gripping the spear tighter. From the mist, glowing eyes appeared, 5, then 10, then more. The hunters had returned. They stepped into view, their armor gleaming faintly in the moonlight, their curved blades raised. This time they were not cautious. They came with purpose, moving like a pack of wolves closing in on prey. The mother gasped. "Daniel, there are too many. You must run." Daniel shook his head. His voice was hard, steady. "I'm not leaving you." The hunters rushed forward. The first swung his blade down toward Daniel's chest. Daniel blocked with his spear, the wood shaking under the impact. Sparks flew as steel met wood, and Daniel pushed back, driving the hunter a step away. Another came from the side. Daniel spun, swinging the spear wide. The sharp end tore across the hunter's shoulder, drawing a cry of pain. But before he could move again, a third hunter kicked him hard in the ribs, sending him stumbling back into the cave wall. The mother cried out, starting to rise, but one of the hunters threw something toward her, a net of strange glowing wires. It crackled with energy, snapping through the air. She pushed her children away just in time, but the net struck her, wrapping around her body. She fell to her knees, gasping as the energy burned against her skin. "Mother!" The children screamed, trying to reach her. Daniel's eyes burned with fury. He forced himself back up, ignoring the pain in his ribs. With a roar, he lunged forward, his spear driving straight into the chest of the hunter holding the net. The alien stumbled back, choking in surprise, before collapsing into The dirt, the others snarled, surrounding him. Blades slashed from every side. Daniel fought with desperate strength, blocking, striking, kicking. His arms ached, his lungs burned, but he did not stop. Each time a blade came close, he thought not of his own life, but of the children crying. Behind him, one hunter swung too wide and Daniel drove his spear into his leg, dropping him to the ground. Another raised his blade high, but before he could strike, the alien mother, still trapped in the net, threw a stone with all her strength. It struck the hunter in the head, stunning him long enough for Daniel to smash his spear across his jaw. Blood dripped from Daniel's wounds. His body screamed with pain, but his eyes blazed with fire. He was not fighting for himself. He was fighting for a family that had no one else. The hunters hesitated. They had expected an easy kill, but this human was not breaking. He fought with a fury they did not understand. He fought as if death itself was nothing compared to failure. Their leader growled, raising his blade. "Finish him!" The hunters charged together. Daniel braced himself, ready for the end. But at that moment, the cave itself seemed to awaken. The strange markings the mother had touched earlier flared to life, glowing with bright light. The ground shook, a low hum filling the air. The hunters stopped, glancing around in alarm. The mother raised her head, her glowing eyes fierce despite her pain. She pressed her hand against the stone again, her voice rising in a strange chant. The cave walls trembled. Rocks fell from above. A blast of light burst from the markings, forcing the hunters back. They stumbled, shielding their faces. Daniel seized the moment, shoving forward with his spear, driving them out of the cave. The forest echoed with their cries as they retreated into the mist. Their leader shouted a final threat. "This is not over, human. We will return with more." And then they were gone. The cave fell silent except for Daniel's ragged breathing. He dropped the spear, falling to his knees. His body was broken and bloody, but his spirit had not fallen. The mother crawled to him, her face pale, the net still burning against her skin. With weak hands, she reached out and touched his cheek. You saved us," she whispered. Daniel looked at her, his chest rising and falling with each breath. "I told you I won't let them take you." The children rushed to him, wrapping their small arms around his waist, crying into his chest. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he thought he had lost forever. Not just purpose, not just strength. He felt family. But outside the cave, the forest was not at peace. The hunters would return. And next time, they would not come in small numbers. The war for this fragile family had only just begun. The human's dilemma. The morning came slowly. The storm had finally passed, leaving the mountains soaked and heavy with mist. Drops of water slid down the rocks, and the air smelled of wet earth. Inside the cave, Daniel opened his tired eyes. He had hardly slept. All night the alien mother's words had echoed in his mind. "Be their father. Be my husband." He sat near the fading fire, staring at the children curled up against their mother. Their small bodies rose and fell with each breath, their glowing eyes finally closed in fragile sleep. The woman too had drifted off, her head resting against the cave wall, exhaustion pulling her into uneasy dreams. Daniel rubbed his face, his thoughts heavy. What was he doing here? He was a human, a wanderer with no home and no family. He had nothing to give, and yet she had asked him for everything, to stay, to fight, to become part of a life he did not understand. He stood and walked quietly, toward the cave's mouth. Outside, the forest stretched wide and green with mist curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. Somewhere out there, her enemies were searching. The thought made his chest tighten. His mind argued with itself. "Leave now while you can. This is not your fight. You don't belong here." But another voice rose inside him, quieter yet stronger. "If you walk away, those children will die. If you leave, her eyes will never look at you with hope again." Daniel clenched his fists. He remembered the loneliness he had carried for years, the silence of empty rooms, the echo of a house with no laughter, the storm of grief that had never left. His heart after his own family was gone, And now, by some strange twist of fate, he had found this cave, this mother, these children. Could it really be chance? Or was it something more? Behind him, a soft voice broke the silence. "You are leaving." Daniel turned. The alien mother was awake, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Her expression was calm, but he could see the fear behind it. She expected him to walk away just like everyone else had. He shook his head. "I was thinking." Her lips trembled as she looked at him. "You owe us nothing. I should not have asked what I asked. No human should carry such a burden." Daniel's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And if I walk away? What happens to you? To them?" He gestured toward the sleeping children. Her eyes shimmered with tears, though she tried to hold them back. "Then I die as I was meant to, alone. They will take my children or they will let them starve. That is the way of my people. Weakness is punished. Mercy does not exist." Daniel's heart pounded. That's not right. No mother should be left to suffer like this. She looked at him with quiet pain. "Then why are you still here?" The question struck deep. He didn't have an answer. All he knew was that something in her voice, something in her children's eyes had pulled him closer instead of pushing him away. Silence filled the cave again. The fire crackled, and the mist outside drifted slowly across the trees. Daniel felt the weight of the choice pressing harder with every passing second. If he stayed, there was no turning back. If he left, he would carry the memory of this moment for the rest of his life. Finally, he let out a slow breath. "I don't know how to be a father to them. I don't know how to be a husband to you. But I know one thing. I cannot leave you, here to die." The alien woman's eyes widened. For a moment, her lips parted, but no sound came. She simply stared at him as if she could not believe his words. Then, slowly, she whispered, "Why? Why would a human care for us?" Daniel's voice was steady now, stronger than before. "Because I've lost everything once, and I won't let it happen again. Not if I can stop it." The children stirred awake, blinking their glowing eyes at Daniel. One of them crawled toward him, reaching out a small hand. Daniel lifted the child gently, feeling its warmth against his chest. The child leaned against him as if he had always been there. The mother watched, her tears finally falling. For the first time, her face carried not just sorrow, but a fragile trace of trust. But just as that moment of quiet hope grew, the sound of a branch snapping echoed from outside the cave. Daniel froze. The mother's head snapped toward the entrance, her eyes wide with fear. "They are near," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They are hunting us." Daniel set the child down carefully and moved toward the cave mouth, his heart pounding. He had made his choice. He would not leave them. But now that choice meant danger was already at their door. The mist outside shifted. Dark shapes moved between the trees, silent but steady. The hunters had found their trail. Inside the cave, the fire flickered. The children pressed closer to their mother. And Daniel, standing at the entrance, felt the weight of his decision settle like armor on his shoulders. The human's dilemma was over. He had chosen his path. Now he would have to fight for it. The human's dilemma. The morning came slowly. The storm had finally passed, leaving the mountains soaked and heavy with mist. Drops of water slid down the rocks, and the air smelled of wet earth. Inside the cave, Daniel opened his tired eyes. He had hardly slept. All night, the alien mother's words had echoed in his mind. "Be their father. Be my husband." He sat near the fading fire, staring at the children curled up against their mother. Their small bodies rose and fell with each breath. Their glowing eyes finally closed in fragile sleep. The woman, too, had drifted off, her head resting against the cave wall, exhaustion pulling her into uneasy dreams. Daniel rubbed his face, his thoughts heavy. What was he doing here? He was a human, a wanderer with no home and no family. He had nothing to give, and yet she had asked him for everything. To stay. To fight. to become part of a life he did not understand. He stood and walked quietly toward the cave's mouth. Outside, the forest stretched wide and green, with mist curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. Somewhere out there, her enemies were searching. The thought made his chest tighten. His mind argued with itself. Leave now while you can. This is not your fight. You don't belong here. But another voice rose inside him, quieter yet stronger. If you walk away, those children will die. If you leave, her eyes will never look at you with hope again. Daniel clenched his fists. He remembered the loneliness he had carried for years, the silence of empty rooms, the echo of a house with no laughter, the storm of grief that had never left, his heart after his own family was gone. And now, by some strange twist of fate, he had found this cave, this mother, these children. Could it really be chance, or was it something more? Behind him, a soft voice broke the silence. You are leaving. Daniel turned. The alien mother was awake, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Her expression was calm, but he could see the fear behind it. She expected him to walk away, just like everyone else had. He shook his head. I was thinking. Her lips trembled as she looked at him. You owe us nothing. I should not have asked what I asked. No human should carry such a burden. Daniel's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. And if I walk away, what happens to you? To them? He gestured toward the sleeping children. Her eyes shimmered with tears, though she tried to hold them back. Then I die as I was meant to. Alone. They will take my children or they will let them starve. That is the way of my people. Weakness is punished. Mercy does not exist. Daniel's heart pounded. That's not right. No mother should be left to suffer like this. She looked at him with quiet pain. Then why are you still here? The question struck deep. He didn't have an answer. All he knew was that something in her voice, something in her children's eyes had pulled him closer instead of pushing him away. Silence filled the cave again. The fire crackled, and the mist outside drifted slowly across the trees. Daniel felt the weight of the choice pressing harder with every passing second. If he stayed, there was no turning back. If he left, he would carry the memory of this moment for the rest of his life. Finally, he let out a slow breath. I don't know how to be a father to them. I don't know how to be a husband to you. But I know one thing. I cannot leave you. Here to die. The alien woman's eyes widened. For a moment, her lips parted, but no sound came. She simply stared at him, as if she could not believe his words. Then, slowly, she whispered, Why? Why would a human care for us? Daniel's voice was steady now, stronger than before. Because I've lost everything once, and I won't let it happen again. Not if I can stop it. The children stirred awake, blinking their glowing eyes at Daniel. One of them crawled toward him, reaching out a small hand. Daniel lifted the child gently, feeling its warmth against his chest. The child leaned against him as if he had always been there. The mother watched, her tears finally falling. For the first time, her face carried not just sorrow but a fragile trace of trust. But just as that moment of quiet hope grew, the sound of a branch snapping echoed from outside the cave. Daniel froze. The mother's head snapped toward the entrance, her eyes wide with fear. They are near, she whispered, her voice trembling. They are hunting us. Daniel set the child down carefully and moved toward the cave mouth, his heart pounding. He had made his choice. He would not leave them, but now that choice meant danger was already at their door. The mist outside shifted. Dark shapes moved between the trees, silent but steady. The hunters had found their trail. Inside the cave, the fire flickered. The children pressed closer to their mother, and Daniel, standing at the entrance, felt the weight of his decision settle like armor on his shoulders. The human's dilemma was over. He had chosen his path. Now, he would have to fight for it. A mother's secret, The fire in the cave burned low, casting long shadows on the stone walls. The storm outside had not ended. Thunder still rolled across the mountains, but inside the cave there was silence. Daniel sat near the flames, trying to understand the strange turn his life had taken. Just hours ago, he had been nothing more than a lonely traveler lost in the storm. Now, he sat face to face with an alien mother and her two fragile children. The woman's glowing eyes never left him. She was holding her children close as if afraid he might vanish or worse, turn against them. Daniel could see her hands trembling, not with anger, but with exhaustion and fear. Finally, she spoke again. Her voice was soft, broken, but full of desperate honesty. "You should not be here," she whispered. "It is dangerous if they find me. They will kill us all." Daniel leaned closer. "Who will find you?" Her eyes flickered with pain. She lowered her gaze and pulled the children tighter against her. "My own people." The words struck him like a stone. Daniel frowned, confused. "Your people? Why would they want to harm you?" "You have children," the woman's voice cracked as she answered. "Because I am no longer one of them. I was cast out. Abandoned." Her lips trembled as she spoke. "They said I was a shame to my kind. They left me here to die, with my children." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had seen cruelty before, humans turning against each other for power, for greed. But to abandon a mother and her children? To cast them out into the wild? To starve and suffer? He could not imagine such coldness. The little ones stirred, their glowing eyes watching Daniel carefully. One of them, too small to even speak properly, reached out a tiny hand toward him. Daniel froze, unsure, but then let the child's fingers curl gently around his own. The alien child's skin was warm, trembling but alive. For the first time since entering the cave, Daniel felt something other than fear. He felt connection. The mother's gaze softened as she saw this. For a moment, her sorrow gave way to something fragile. "Hope," she whispered, almost too quietly to hear. "You should go. You do not belong here. If you stay, they will hunt you too." Daniel shook his head. His voice was calm, but firm. "I can't just leave. Not after what I've seen." The woman closed her eyes, her shoulders shaking. A tear slid down her silver-like skin. When she spoke again, her words came from the deepest corner of her soul. "If you stay, then I must ask you something. Something no human should ever accept." Daniel leaned forward, his heart pounding. He could sense the weight of her words before she even said them. "Be their father," she whispered. Her voice cracked with emotion, her eyes filled with desperation. "Be my husband. Protect us. If you leave, my children will not survive. If you stay, you must become one of us." The fire hissed as a drop of rainwater fell from the ceiling. Daniel felt the world spin around him. A husband? A father? To creatures not even of his kind? The idea was madness. He wanted to speak, but no words came. The woman misread his silence as rejection. She clutched her children tightly, her tears falling fast. "Forgive me," she whispered. "It is too much to ask." No human would bind himself to an outcast alien and her cursed children. Daniel shook his head, struggling to find words. I don't know what to say. This is impossible." Her eyes burned with sorrow as she met his gaze. "I know. But I have nothing left to give them. No food, no safety, no hope. Only a father could give them a future. Only you." The children pressed closer to her, their fragile bodies trembling. Daniel's mind raced. He had lost everything. Once before, his family, his home, his reason to live. And yet here in this cave he felt something stir inside him. A chance to give meaning to his life again. Still, he hesitated. The danger was real. If what she said was true, then enemies could appear at any time. They were not only abandoned, but hunted. Staying with them would mean war, struggle, and pain, but leaving would mean condemning them to death. Daniel looked at the children again. Their glowing eyes stared back at him, innocent and pleading. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of choice not just for himself, but for others who depended on him. The fire flickered low, shadows dancing across their faces. The cave seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his answer. Finally, Daniel whispered, "I cannot promise what I do not understand, but I will not leave you tonight." The woman's eyes widened, tears shining in the dim firelight. She did not smile, but her trembling hand reached out, almost touching his before pulling back in shyness and fear. "Then, we live another night," she said softly. Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside the cave, a new storm had begun, one of choices, of secrets, and of destiny. Daniel did not yet know it, but the path he had stepped onto would change not only his life, but the future of an entire world. The cry in the darkness. The storm was merciless that night. Rain poured from the sky like endless sheets of water, and the wind howled through the mountains with a wild voice. A lonely man walked along the rocky path, his clothes soaked, his boots heavy with mud. He had been traveling for days, searching for a way through the endless wilderness. His name was Daniel, and he had no one waiting for him at home. His life was a journey without a destination, and this storm was just another obstacle. But as the thunder rolled above, Daniel heard something unusual. It was not the cry of the wind or the roar of the storm. It was softer, fragile, almost broken. It was the sound of a cry that did not belong to the night or the storm. He stopped. At first he thought it might be his imagination, but then it came again, faint yet clear, echoing between the mountains. A cry of pain, a cry of fear. Daniel's heart tightened. Against his better judgment, he followed the sound. The path led him to a wide opening hidden between tall rocks. A dark cave stood before him, water dripping from its mouth. The sound came from inside. Daniel felt his chest grow heavy. Every instinct told him to stay away. The wilderness was full of dangers, wild animals, hidden predators, and things he could not name. But there was something about that cry, something that reached inside him. He took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. The cave was cold, the air damp and heavy. His footsteps echoed softly as he moved forward. The deeper he went, the clearer the sound became. It was no longer just a cry. It was mixed with whispers, gentle, broken words he could not understand. His heart pounded harder with each step. Finally, the flickering light of a small fire reached his eyes. Daniel froze, hiding behind a jagged rock. In the glow of the fire, he saw them. A woman, though not human, sat against the stone wall. Her skin shimmered faintly, like silver touched by moonlight. Her eyes were large, glowing softly in the dark, full of sorrow. In her arms, two small children pressed close to her, their faces pale with fear and hunger. They were unlike anything Daniel had ever seen, part alien, yet so fragile, so innocent, so alive. The mother was whispering to them, trying to keep them calm. But her voice cracked, and tears ran down her strange but beautiful face. She looked weak, as if she had not eaten for days. Her arms trembled as she held her children tighter, shielding them from a world that had already abandoned them. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. He had stumbled upon something he could not explain. A family that should not exist here. An alien mother hiding in the shadows, protecting her children from dangers unseen. The cry he had followed was hers. The woman suddenly raised her head, her glowing eyes locked onto Daniel's hiding place. For a moment, silence filled the cave. The fire crackled softly and the storm rumbled outside. Daniel's body froze, unsure whether to step forward or run back into the rain. But then something unexpected happened. The alien mother did not attack. She did not scream. Instead, she looked at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Slowly, she whispered in a trembling voice. Though her words were broken, Daniel understood their meaning. "Help. Please. Help my children? Her voice struck him deeper than any weapon could. The children stirred, looking at him with wide, frightened eyes. They were thin, weak, and trembling. Daniel felt his heart twist. He remembered the loneliness of his own life, the years of silence after losing his family. And now, in this cave, he saw that same loneliness but multiplied by fear and hunger. He stepped out from the shadows, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. The woman flinched, but did not move away. Her children clung to her tightly. Daniel knelt near the fire, his voice steady but gentle. I won't hurt you, I just heard your cry. The alien mother studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, with tears in her glowing eyes, she whispered again, Don't leave us, please don't leave. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cave, a new story had just begun. A story of a human, an abandoned mother, and two fragile lives hanging by a thread. Daniel did not know why fate had brought him here. All he knew was that he could not walk away, and in the cold darkness of that cave, he felt a pull stronger than fear. The beginning of something that would change everything.